What happens when a young, innocent boy is violently attacked by a police officer, only for the world to turn upside down when the officer discovers the child's father is the very chief of police? This shocking twist will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice and redemption. In the tender blush of early dawn, Chicago awakened as if emerging from a dream, a sprawling urban canvas where hope and despair danced in an intricate waltz. The city, renowned for its towering skyline and storied streets, hummed with the promise of a new beginning. Gentle rays of sunlight spilled over brick facades and glass towers alike, casting elongated shadows that whispered secrets of generations past. It was on such a morning that the heartbeat of the city seemed to pulse with a mixture of quiet determination and unspoken mystery, setting the stage for a story that would both captivate and haunt the souls of its listeners. In one of the quieter, yet no less vibrant neighborhoods of Chicago, a young boy named Elijah stepped out into the world with an innocence as palpable as the crisp morning air. His dark eyes, wide and unclouded by the weight of the world, shimmered with curiosity and the unyielding desire to embrace every possibility that the day might hold. With each step along the worn pavement, Elijah carried a secret, a belief that even the smallest of hearts could hold a universe of dreams and that every fleeting moment was a precious gift waiting to be cherished. His modest backpack, scuffed from countless adventures and imbued with memories of laughter and love, swung gently at his side as if echoing the rhythm of his unburdened spirit. Elijah's journey began in the soft light of morning, with the neighborhood stirring to life around him. The familiar murmur of conversation from stoops and doorways, the distant clatter of the city's relentless pulse, and the occasional greeting of a neighbor all wove together into a tapestry of warmth and connection. Every corner of the block seemed to hum with an energy that was both comforting and enigmatic, a reminder that even in a vast, sprawling metropolis, each individual was a vital thread in the fabric of the community. As he strolled along the street, Elijah's thoughts flitted from the mundane to the marvelous. He imagined the park ahead as a sanctuary of laughter and dreams, a place where the boundaries between fantasy and reality blurred in the light of youthful wonder. In his mind's eye, the park was not merely a stretch of green space, but a realm where every blade of grass, every rustling leaf, and every murmured breeze was imbued with possibility. It was a place where the heart could soar free of judgment, where the art of living was practiced in its purest form. Yet, even as the day unfolded with a promise of serenity and unbridled potential, there lingered an undercurrent of tension, an almost imperceptible dissonance that hinted at the fragility of innocence. Not far from the gentle rhythm of Elijah's steps, a patrol car cruised the streets with a quiet urgency. Within its confines sat Officer Brandon, a young man newly ensconced in the role of protector, yet burdened by the weight of expectations and internal conflicts that he struggled to fully comprehend. Brandon's eyes, though earnest and intent on maintaining the delicate balance between duty and decency, betrayed fleeting moments of uncertainty, a hesitation that spoke of battles fought in the hidden recesses of his heart. Officer Brandon's journey that morning was one of conflicting emotions. His mind teetered on the edge of idealism and the harsh realities imposed by a system steeped in tradition and, at times, in prejudice. The responsibility he felt as an officer was immense, and every day brought with it the challenge of safeguarding a community while wrestling with the subtle biases that threatened to cloud his judgment. As he navigated the familiar streets of Chicago, his gaze, for a moment, caught sight of a small figure moving with an air of unselfconscious joy. It was Elijah, whose presence seemed to embody everything pure and hopeful in the world. In that brief encounter, the officer experienced a spark, a fleeting glimpse of the beauty that he so desperately wished to protect. Yet, within that same moment, the seeds of an unintentional misstep were being sown, destined to intertwine the fates of these two very different souls in ways neither could foresee. The morning marched onward with a serene rhythm, punctuated by the harmonious interplay of nature and urban life. The streets, bathed in the soft glow of the rising sun, became a living mosaic of sights, sounds, and scents. Street vendors began to set up their colorful stalls, their voices mingling with the distant strains of a saxophone playing a soulful melody on a busy corner. The magnificent mile, with its dazzling array of storefronts and bustling crowds, stood as a symbol of the city's enduring vibrancy, a beacon of modernity amidst the echoes of history. Yet, beneath the surface of this bustling tableau lay an intangible quality, a fragile aura of vulnerability that clung to the early hours like a whispered secret. Elijah's innocent journey through these familiar streets was not just a simple walk to the park. It was a pilgrimage toward a world of unfiltered beauty and raw emotion, a quest to capture the fleeting moments of wonder that danced in the early light. Every sound, every movement, every fleeting glance from a passerby contributed to an evolving narrative that was as unpredictable as it was profound. In those moments, the city was not merely a backdrop, but an active participant in a drama that was destined to unfold with startling intensity. As Elijah ambled closer to his destination, his mind remained blissfully unaware of the undercurrent swirling around him. He was lost in the reverie of youthful dreams, of games yet to be played, friendships yet to be deepened, and the endless adventures that awaited him in the park's verdant embrace. His spirit, unburdened by cynicism or the weight of past disappointments, soared with the unquenchable fire of hope. It was as if he carried within him an innate understanding that life, with all its unpredictable twists and turns, held within it the promise of redemption and renewal. At that same pivotal moment, while the city's pulse beat steadily and relentlessly, Officer Brandon's internal world was undergoing a quiet revolution of its own. Torn between the desire to serve with honor and the lingering shadows of inherited preconceptions, Brandon's thoughts swirled like dark clouds on an otherwise clear day. The image of Elijah, radiant in his simplicity and untainted by the complexities of the world, sparked within him a cascade of conflicting emotions. There was admiration, certainly, for the purity of the child's expression, yet there was also a disconcerting echo of uncertainty that hinted at the challenges of reconciling one's ideals with the stark demands of reality. In that fleeting instance, as the officer's gaze met the unguarded smile of a boy who seemed to embody the very essence of innocence, the foundations of his beliefs trembled with the promise of both possibility and peril. The gentle murmur of the city provided a counterpoint to the silent symphony of emotions playing out in the hearts of its inhabitants. The aroma of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery mingled with the crisp scent of morning dew, crafting an olfactory memory that would linger long after the sun had climbed higher in the sky. For Elijah, every breath was a reminder of life's simple pleasures, of moments that could be savored despite the inevitable storms that sometimes darken even the brightest days. In his unassuming journey, the boy carried the latent hope that every smile exchanged, every kind word spoken, had the power to mend the fractures of a fractured world. The quiet determination that defined Elijah's every step was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that refused to be overshadowed by the burdens of an unjust system or the callousness of chance encounters. In his eyes burned a fierce light, a glimmer of innocence that was at once fragile and indomitable, a beacon of hope that promised to outlast even the darkest moments of doubt. It was this light, gentle yet unyielding, that would eventually captivate the hearts of those who encountered it, drawing them into a narrative that was as complex as it was beautiful. As the morning unfolded with a quiet majesty, The city of Chicago itself seemed to lean in closer, as though eager to bear witness to a tale that defied the ordinary. Every corner, every lamppost, every whispered conversation held within it the potential for revelation, a promise that the secrets of the day would soon be unveiled. In that delicate balance between light and shadow, between the innocence of youth and the harsh realities of a world marred by injustice, lay the seeds of a transformation that would ripple far beyond the confines of a single neighborhood. In the soft interplay of sound and light, as the city's heartbeat melded with the inner cadence of a young soul, there emerged a sense of anticipation, a quiet, almost imperceptible pull that beckoned the listener to delve deeper into the unfolding story. It was as if the very air vibrated with the promise of change, with the potential for a moment so profound that it would alter the course of lives in ways both subtle and dramatic. The narrative of that morning was not merely a chronicle of time passing, but a living, breathing saga, one that captured the eternal struggle between the purity of hope and the corrosive forces of prejudice. Even as the sun ascended to claim its rightful throne in the sky, casting its golden glow upon the city, the story of Elijah and his innocent journey was already beginning to etch itself into the hearts of those who would soon become its witnesses. The gentle cadence of his footsteps, the unassuming grace with which he navigated the labyrinth of urban life, and the quiet determination in his eyes were all threads in a tapestry that promised to unravel into a saga of emotion, resilience, and the enduring power of hope. In that moment of delicate balance, where every ray of sunlight and every whisper of wind conspired to reveal the beauty hidden within the chaos of existence, the stage was set for a revelation, a spark that would ignite a fire of transformation in the hearts of all who encountered it. The journey of a young boy, unburdened by the cynicism of experience yet destined to face the harsh truths of a divided world, was a narrative that transcended time and space. It was a call to embrace the vulnerability of our own hearts, to acknowledge that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there exists a power within us to rise, to dream, and to transform the mundane into the miraculous. Thus, in the quiet majesty of that Chicago morning, as the city prepared itself for the unfolding of events both mysterious and profound, the gentle glow of Elijah's innocence shone forth, a glimmer of hope that would challenge the darkness, provoke introspection, and ultimately bind together the disparate threads of a story that promised to captivate, to shock, and to inspire. For in that singular moment, when the innocence of a child met the somber realities of a world on the brink of transformation, the stage was set for a journey that would resonate in the hearts of every listener, urging them to follow the path of redemption and to seek the light that lies hidden even in the deepest shadows. And so, with every heartbeat echoing the promise of a new day, Chicago bore witness to the inception of a tale so potent and stirring that it would linger long after the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. A story of innocence, of hope, and of the quiet, unyielding determination to reclaim the beauty of the human spirit against all odds. In the bright yet deceptively ordinary light of a Chicago afternoon, the city seemed to pulse with an energy that concealed as much as it revealed. The familiar hum of bustling streets near the Magnificent Mile was interwoven with a subtle tension that no one could quite pinpoint, a tension that lay dormant beneath the rhythmic cadence of urban life until it was suddenly awakened by an event that would irrevocably alter the day's course. Officer Brandon's patrol car navigated the busy avenues with practiced precision. Every routine turn and measured stop was a testament to his commitment to protect and serve. Yet beneath the veneer of steadfast duty, Brandon wrestled with an inner turmoil that had been quietly building over months of conflicting experiences. In his eyes, every passerby was a potential threat, every hurried movement a clue to an unseen crime. That afternoon, as he cruised past the glittering storefronts and the lively chatter of tourists and locals alike, His mind was already caught in the ceaseless debate between instinct and reason. It was then that his gaze fell upon a small figure walking along the crowded sidewalk, a figure that, in the ordinary flow of life, might have gone unnoticed. Elijah, the young boy whose every step had previously been marked by the gentle innocence of youth, now unknowingly became the focal point of a moment that would forever shatter the fragile equilibrium of trust and safety in the community. Brandon's eyes narrowed as he recalled a vague report of petty theft circulating through the channels of his department, a report that, through the murky lens of preconception, painted a picture of a suspect that seemed to materialize before him. In that fleeting moment, his internal dialogue, burdened by deep-seated biases and the pressures of a system steeped in suspicion, converged on Elijah. Without a pause to truly consider the humanity behind the figure before him, Brandon's hand moved instinctively toward the canister secured at his side. In an instant that stretched into eternity, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. The boy, oblivious to the dark cloud gathering behind him, continued his measured walk toward the promise of a nearby park, a sanctuary of laughter and fleeting dreams. But in the blink of an eye, the calm of the afternoon was shattered by a burst of chemical spray. The assault was swift and merciless. A cloud of pepper spray erupted from Brandon's outstretched hand, its invisible particles striking Elijah's face with a force that belied the innocence of the moment. In an explosion of searing pain and blinding disarray, the boy's vision clouded, and his world transformed from one of gentle light and shadow into a maelstrom of agony and confusion. The chemical's burn was immediate, a fiery betrayal that forced tears to stream down Elijah's face as his small hand instinctively clawed at his eyes. In that moment, the ordinary street scene was replaced by an unnerving tableau of distress, a tableau that no one present could have anticipated. Onlookers froze in stunned silence as the event unfolded before their eyes. Some were paralyzed by shock, their hearts clenching at the sight of such unprovoked violence, while others hesitated, caught in the paralysis of disbelief and uncertainty. In the midst of the chaos, whispers began to ripple through the crowd, a mix of anger, fear, and sorrow that seemed to echo the unspoken truth of what had just transpired. The vibrant energy of the Magnificent Mile, once a stage for commerce and culture, now bore the heavy imprint of injustice and regret. For Elijah, every second of that harrowing encounter stretched into an eternity of pain. The burning sensation in his eyes merged with a crushing sense of betrayal, as if the world he had trusted had suddenly turned against him. His thoughts, once filled with the simple delight of a boy enraptured by his surroundings, now swirled with questions that offered no comfort. Why? What did I do? The questions echoed in the recesses of his mind, growing louder with every agonizing moment. Each tear that fell was a silent testament to the deep wounds inflicted not only upon his body but upon the very core of his belief in the kindness of the world. Officer Brandon, standing mere feet away from the distraught child, felt a sudden jolt of conflicted emotions that wavered between cold determination and a dawning sense of regret. His training had been clear. Swift, decisive action was paramount in maintaining control and preventing further harm. Yet as he observed the raw terror in Elijah's eyes, a part of him recoiled from the brutality of his own actions. In the midst of the adrenaline that surged through his veins, Brandon's internal landscape became a battleground, a clash between the ingrained impulses of authority and the quietly emerging realization of a mistake that could never be undone. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation was a blur of commands and chaos. Brandon's voice, harsh and unyielding, rang out as he ordered Elijah to stay still, his tone a mix of urgency and the sterile detachment of official protocol. But the words fell flat against the backdrop of the unfolding tragedy, lost in the desperate cries of a child overcome by pain and confusion. The crowd's murmur grew into a dissonant chorus of dissent and disbelief, their voices a collective indictment of an act that had stripped away the dignity of youth. In those moments, the street itself seemed to hold its breath, as if the very soul of Chicago recoiled in horror at the injustice unfolding before it. The radiant light that had illuminated the day was suddenly dimmed by the shadow of an act that defied logic and morality. The vibrant hues of the city's architecture and the cheerful cadence of daily life were momentarily replaced by the raw, unfiltered emotion of a community grappling with the implications of prejudice and mistaken judgment. Elijah's body, fragile and unprepared for such an onslaught, began to crumble under the weight of the pain. His small form shook uncontrollably, the remnants of his earlier innocence giving way to the harsh reality of an encounter that had transformed him from a carefree wanderer into a victim of systemic cruelty. Every step he attempted to take was marred by the relentless burn of the chemical spray, and the sounds of the city, once a comforting lullaby, now served as a harsh reminder of a world that had suddenly become inhospitable. As the confrontation reached its crescendo, the disparate elements of the scene converged into a single, undeniable truth. An act of violence, born from a moment of misguided impulse, had irrevocably altered the course of an ordinary day. Officer Brandon, still grappling with the implications of his own actions, felt the weight of his decision press down on him like an insurmountable burden. His hand, which had acted with the swiftness of an unthinking reflex, now trembled with the realization that he had crossed a line, one that no amount of training or discipline could ever fully erase. The street, once filled with the innocent bustle of daily life, now bore witness to the stark reality of injustice. Faces in the crowd, etched with shock and sorrow, became a silent jury to the event, a jury that demanded accountability and whispered of change. In that charged atmosphere, the unspoken message was clear. The balance between authority and empathy had been shattered, and the repercussions would ripple far beyond the immediate scene. Officer Brandon's next actions were a blur of protocol and reluctant compliance with the situation's unfolding demands. With a strained urgency, he beckoned to Elijah, his voice faltering as he attempted to regain control of a scenario spiraling into chaos. The young boy, barely comprehending the magnitude of what had just occurred, was gently but firmly ushered toward the waiting patrol car, a vehicle that, in that moment, symbolized not safety, but the beginning of an ordeal that would expose the deepest fractures within the system meant to protect him. Inside the patrol car, the world seemed to narrow to a singular focus on the pain and confusion that radiated from Elijah. The inside of the car was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the bright, chaotic light of the street. Every bump on the road, every jolt of the vehicle, sent waves of torment through his already wounded body. The pungent scent of the pepper spray mingled with the sterile odor of the car's interior, creating an atmosphere of unrelenting discomfort that echoed the emotional torment of the moment. Outside, the vibrant pulse of Chicago continued unabated, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding within the confines of the vehicle. In those long, harrowing moments of transit, Officer Brandon's mind was a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts. The initial clarity of his purpose had given way to a profound disorientation, a realization that his actions, however well-intentioned in the moment of perceived threat, had inflicted deep and irreversible pain upon an innocent soul. The fleeting spark of regret that had ignited within him now burned with an intensity that threatened to consume his very sense of identity. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, the rapid sequence of decisions made in a split second, and wondered if, in that chaotic instant, the scales of justice had been irrevocably tipped in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, the echoes of the confrontation continued to reverberate through the street. Witnesses, their faces marked by a shared sense of disbelief, began to murmur among themselves, their voices carrying the weight of unspoken questions. Some whispered of the need for accountability, of the necessity for a reckoning with a system that allowed such errors to occur unchecked. Others, their voices softer but no less determined, spoke of the potential for redemption, a hope that even in the wake of such a grievous mistake, there might be a path toward healing and transformation. The journey in the patrol car was not only a physical transition from one space to another, but also a passage into a realm of emotional reckoning, a journey that would force both Elijah and Officer Brandon to confront the darkest recesses of their respective realities. For Elijah, the ride was an excruciating reminder of the vulnerability of youth, a poignant contrast to the carefree dreams that had once illuminated his every step. For Brandon, it was a descent into a stark introspection, a moment of profound self-awareness that would haunt him long after the events of the day had faded into memory. As the patrol car rolled on toward the police station, a building that loomed in the distance like a monument to the weight of authority, the scene outside shifted subtly. The brilliant hues of the day began to soften as the shadows lengthened, and the once celebratory sounds of the city were replaced by a hushed tension, as if Chicago itself mourned the innocence lost in that fateful moment. Every streetlight, every whisper of wind seemed to carry with it the collective sorrow of a community suddenly forced to reckon with the painful realities of prejudice and the fallibility of those entrusted with its protection. In that moment of transition, the confrontation had grown beyond a mere misjudged act. It had become a profound commentary on the fragility of trust and the devastating impact of bias. The chaos of the scene had distilled into a powerful, unyielding truth that even in a city renowned for its resilience and hope, the seeds of injustice could sprout from the smallest of actions, casting long shadows over lives and communities alike. Inside the car, as Elijah's tear-streaked face and trembling form told a story of raw, unfiltered suffering, Officer Brandon's internal battle intensified. He realized, with a dawning horror, that the actions he had taken in a moment of misguided urgency would resonate far beyond the immediate scene. The silent echo of that fateful spray would haunt him in quiet moments and shape the rest of his career. The very foundations of his beliefs, long taken for granted, were now subject to the harsh light of introspection, a light that revealed the deep, systemic faults that had allowed such an injustice to occur. The ride to the station stretched on, each moment a reminder of the irreversible consequences of a single decision. The rhythmic hum of the engine served as a cruel metronome to the cadence of regret that pounded relentlessly in Brandon's chest. And as the car drew closer to its destination, a place that symbolized both the promise of order and the cold detachment of institutional processes, both the young boy and the officer braced themselves for the next act in a drama that had already altered the course of their lives forever. In that long, silent journey, the unspoken truths of the afternoon converged into a singular narrative of pain, confusion, and the desperate hope for redemption. The city of Chicago, with all its complexities and contradictions, bore silent witness to the unfolding tragedy, a tragedy that would spark a chain of events leading to questions of accountability, the reevaluation of deeply held biases, and ultimately, the possibility of healing for a community scarred by injustice. As the patrol car finally pulled up to the imposing entrance of the police station, the weight of the confrontation pressed down on every moment. The looming building, with its stark lines and unforgiving architecture, seemed to embody the cold, bureaucratic response to a deeply personal tragedy. Within those walls, the true impact of the day's events would soon be laid bare, a reckoning that would force all involved to confront not only the physical evidence of the act, but also the deeper, more insidious currents of prejudice that had driven it. Thus, in the fading light of that transformative afternoon, the scene was set for a journey into the heart of injustice, a journey that would test the limits of human resilience and force an unflinching examination of the values that underpin a society in search of redemption. The confrontation, unprovoked and all too swift, had shattered the delicate balance of hope and trust, leaving behind a chasm that would demand to be filled with truth, accountability, and the courage to embrace change. In the silence that followed, as the doors of the station loomed ominously before them, the echoes of the day's events reverberated like a haunting refrain, a refrain that would linger in the memories of everyone present and serve as a stark reminder that even the briefest lapse in judgment could have consequences that reverberate across a lifetime. For Elijah and Officer Brandon, that day marked a turning point, a moment when the seemingly mundane rhythms of life were irreversibly altered by an act of violence that spoke to the darker undercurrents of a society struggling to reconcile its ideals with its realities. And so, as the heavy doors of the station beckoned them into a new realm of uncertainty and introspection, the journey of both the innocent child and the conflicted officer continued. A journey that would delve into the depths of regret, the quest for accountability, and the painful yet necessary path toward healing. The confrontation had ended, but its reverberations were only just beginning to be felt, a testament to the profound impact of a single, unthinking moment and a call to confront the shadows that lurk beneath the surface of even the most ordinary days in a city that, despite it all, still dared to hope for a better tomorrow. In the stark, unforgiving light of the police station, the world seemed to contract around Elijah as he struggled to make sense of a reality that had been shattered in an instant. The cool, sterile walls of the interrogation room offered no solace, only a harsh reminder of how quickly innocence could be sullied by cruelty. Seated on a rigid metal chair in a room that felt too small for his fragile spirit, Elijah's eyes, still stinging with the residue of chemical burn, fixed on a spot far beyond the confines of that bleak space. In that moment, his mind became a refuge, a place where the gentle echoes of happier times intertwined with the painful present, forming a fragile bridge between despair and hope. Every sound in that room was amplified. The soft tick of a clock, the distant hum of fluorescent lights, and even the uneven rhythm of his own breathing reverberated against the cold walls. As he sat there, the memories of a sunlit morning in his neighborhood in Chicago, when laughter mingled with the gentle rustle of leaves and every step was filled with boundless wonder, seemed to beckon him. In those recollections, the park was a sanctuary, a place where dreams took flight without the burden of suspicion or fear. He could almost hear the cheerful banter of friends, the warm greetings of familiar faces, and the promise of a day filled with endless possibility. Yet now, those memories contrasted bitterly with the oppressive atmosphere of the interrogation room, where every minute stretched into an eternity of unspoken questions and unhealed pain. The room itself was a study in contrasts. Its walls, painted a dull institutional gray, absorbed every ounce of warmth, while the harsh overhead light created shadows that danced mockingly across the surface. There was no decoration, no reminder of the vibrant life that once pulsed outside these walls, only the relentless, measured ticking of time that reminded Elijah that every second was slipping away, leaving behind the scars of a moment he could neither forget nor undo. In that confinement, his mind was forced to traverse the tumultuous landscape of his own emotions, each thought a battle between the desire to surrender to despair and the stubborn spark of resilience that urged him to hold on. As he struggled to steady his trembling hands, Elijah's thoughts drifted to the day before, a day filled with gentle promise that had turned so suddenly into a nightmare. He remembered the quiet joy of walking through familiar streets, the unassuming beauty of the city that had cradled his youthful dreams. Now, the pain in his eyes was not just physical, it was the embodiment of a deeper betrayal, a violation of the trust he had so freely given to a world that had promised him safety. And yet, in the midst of that overwhelming sorrow, there was a small, almost imperceptible ember of determination. It was as if his very soul was whispering, "I am more than this moment. I will rise from these ashes." Even as his body ached with each heartbeat, his mind clung to that fragile belief, a belief that his story was not defined solely by the cruelty inflicted upon him, but by the strength that would eventually carry him through the darkness. Officer Brandon's presence in that room, though not as imposing as the memory of the assault itself, loomed like a constant reminder of the events that had led him here. His own posture, rigid and uncertain, betrayed an inner conflict that he dared not voice. Brandon's gaze would occasionally flicker towards Elijah, and in those fleeting moments, there was a silent exchange, a wordless acknowledgement of the irrevocable harm done and the shared recognition that something essential had been lost. Yet the air between them was thick with a tension that neither could fully dispel, as both were caught in a vortex of regret and unspoken understanding. For Brandon, the interrogation was not merely a procedural necessity. It was an unwelcome confrontation with the consequences of a moment's error, a moment that had forever altered the course of two lives. In the hours that followed, the interrogation unfolded like a grim ritual. Officer Brandon's questions, though meticulously rehearsed and methodically delivered, resonated with an undercurrent of accusation that cut deeper than any physical wound. The stark light in the room seemed to illuminate not only the scars on Elijah's face, but also the raw vulnerability in his eyes, a vulnerability that pleaded for recognition, for justice, for the chance to be heard. Each question forced Elijah to revisit that harrowing moment, to sift through the layers of confusion and pain in search of an explanation he could not provide. The barrage of inquiries, cold and relentless, threatened to erode the remnants of his once unblemished spirit. Yet even as he faltered under the weight of interrogation, a quiet defiance began to stir within him, a defiance born of the recognition that his truth, however fractured, was his own to claim. Between the harsh cadence of the officer's voice and the oppressive silence of the room, Elijah found himself drifting into memories of better days. He recalled the gentle touch of his mother's hand, the soothing cadence of her lullabies, and the unyielding warmth of community gatherings, where every smile and every shared moment was a testament to the power of collective resilience. These recollections, vivid and tender, became his sanctuary, a mental refuge where the stinging pain of the present could be momentarily transformed into the healing promise of the past. In those precious moments, he allowed himself to imagine a future where the scars of injustice could be repurposed into symbols of strength, where every tear shed was not an admission of defeat but a seed of transformation. As the interrogation progressed, the oppressive atmosphere of the room seemed to close in around him. Yet with each passing minute, Elijah's resolve grew stronger. The physical pain, relentless and unyielding, became a distant echo compared to the fierce determination that began to kindle within him. He realized that, despite the severity of his ordeal, his spirit was not broken. Instead, it was being tempered by the fires of adversity, reshaped into something new, a quiet, unwavering strength that would one day define him. In that transformation, there was a promise. The promise that he would emerge from this crucible not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience, a beacon for others who had suffered silently under the weight of injustice. Within the sterile confines of the police station, far removed from the warmth of his neighborhood and the comforting embrace of community, Elijah embarked on an inward journey that transcended the immediate pain of the moment. It was a journey of self-discovery and reawakening, a journey that compelled him to confront the duality of his existence, where vulnerability and strength coexisted in a delicate balance. Every question that cut into him was also a call to reclaim his identity, to affirm that the cruelty of the day would not define his future. He began to recognize that his capacity for hope, however fragile, was an indomitable force, a force that could inspire not only his own healing, but also the transformation of a system marred by prejudice and neglect. In the midst of this internal odyssey, subtle shifts in the room's dynamics provided moments of unexpected tenderness. A brief pause in the interrogation, a soft murmur from a sympathetic colleague, or the gentle reassurance from a social worker assigned to the case, all these small acts of humanity coalesced into a quiet symphony of compassion. These gestures, though understated, kindled in Elijah a sense of being seen and heard, an affirmation that even in the darkest of moments, the light of empathy could pierce through the gloom. They offered him a glimpse of a future where the scars of today might one day be healed by the collective will of a community determined to uphold dignity and justice. Officer Brandon, too, found himself grappling with the aftermath of his actions in the isolation of that room. His professional duty demanded answers, yet each question he posed was now colored by the growing awareness of his own fallibility. In the quiet moments when the interrogation's cadence slowed, Brandon's eyes betrayed a deep-seated remorse, a recognition that the events unfolding were not merely about procedural missteps, but about the irreversible impact of a single, misguided action. Though he maintained his composure outwardly, inside he was besieged by a tumult of emotions, regret, guilt, and the dawning realization that the path to redemption would be paved with introspection and, perhaps, transformation. As time in the interrogation room melted into a series of agonizingly slow minutes, the stark contrast between the institutional coldness and the raw vulnerability of a child on the brink of despair became all the more evident. The room, with its unyielding light and unadorned walls, bore silent witness to the clash between a rigid system and the tender resilience of a spirit determined to survive. And in that crucible of conflicting forces, Elijah began to forge a new understanding of himself, a realization that while he could not erase the scars of the past, he could choose to honor them by emerging stronger, more compassionate, and resolute in his quest for a better tomorrow. In the silent communion between his heart and the echoes of his memories, Elijah discovered that resilience was not the absence of pain, but the ability to transform pain into a catalyst for growth. He recognized that every tear, every moment of despair, was imbued with the potential for rebirth, a chance to redefine his narrative from one of victimhood to one of empowerment. And as the interrogation continued with its relentless scrutiny, he resolved, in the quiet recesses of his soul, that he would not allow this day to strip him of the beauty and wonder that had once defined him. By the time the interrogation drew to a close, a subtle metamorphosis had taken root within Elijah. Though his body still bore the marks of that fateful encounter, his spirit had begun to mend, slowly weaving the frayed threads of his identity into a tapestry of quiet determination. In that small, oppressive room, amid the sterile hum of fluorescent lights and the weight of unanswered questions, the journey of resilience had only just begun, a journey that promised that even in the darkest hour, the indomitable strength of the human spirit could shine through, lighting the way toward healing and hope. And so, as the echoes of the interrogation faded into a heavy silence, Elijah's eyes, now clearer and steadier, reflected not just the lingering pain of the present, but the dawning realization that his story was far from over. It was a story that would be written not by the cruelty of a single moment, but by the enduring courage to rise above it, a story that would resonate in the hearts of those who believe that even the deepest wounds could one day give way to the triumph of the human spirit. In the midst of an oppressive silence that had swallowed the sterile corridors of the police station, the tension in the interrogation room reached a fevered pitch. The air, heavy with the remnants of anguish and regret, trembled as the door swung open with a resonant authority that cut through the pall of despair. At that moment, Chief Anderson entered the room, his presence a powerful force that redefined the very fabric of the space. The man carried himself with an air of quiet determination and unyielding resolve, his gaze both piercing and compassionate, a gaze that belied the weight of countless burdens he had borne in his years of service. His arrival was not merely an intervention, it was a revelation, a turning point that would forever alter the course of the events that had unfolded. The silence that followed his entrance was electric, as if every molecule in the room acknowledged the significance of the moment. Chief Anderson's eyes swept over the scene with an intensity that conveyed both shock and sorrow. His attention fell immediately upon Elijah, whose tear-streaked face and weary posture were a stark testament to the cruelty that had invaded his life. In that charged moment, the chief's heart clenched with a father's protective instinct, a fierce, unspoken promise that he would shield his child from any further harm. Without hesitation, he strode towards Elijah, his steps measured and deliberate, as though every footfall carried the weight of a promise to restore justice and mend the fractures of a broken system. As Chief Anderson knelt beside his son, his gentle hand reached out to caress Elijah's tear-soaked cheek, a silent vow of protection that spoke louder than words. "You're safe now, son," he murmured, his voice a soft yet powerful blend of warmth and authority. The words, imbued with both tenderness and the steely resolve of a man who had weathered many storms, began to weave a fragile tapestry of hope around the young boy. For Elijah, whose world had been rendered nearly unrecognizable by the harshness of recent events, the presence of his father ignited a spark of relief, a fleeting yet profound reminder that amidst the darkness, love and redemption could still prevail. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably as Chief Anderson's calm yet resolute tone permeated the space. His eyes then turned to Officer Brandon, whose previously unwavering composure now faltered under the intensity of the chief's gaze. In that silent exchange, Brandon's internal struggle was laid bare, a maelstrom of regret, disbelief, and a dawning awareness of the irreversible consequences of his actions. The authority of the chief was not just procedural, it was moral, a living embodiment of the values that had been betrayed in the heat of an impulsive moment. The chief's eyes darkened with disappointment, yet kindled with an unwavering sense of duty, pierced through Brandon's defiant veneer. "Explain yourself," Chief Anderson said, his voice carrying the weight of both a commanding officer and a grieving father. It was a moment where the accumulated grievances of the day converged into a singular, unrelenting demand for accountability. Brandon, caught in the unyielding grip of his own remorse, attempted to find words that might justify the unjustifiable. His voice, once steady with the certainty of duty, now wavered as he stammered feebly, I, I thought I was doing my duty. I believed." His words faltered under the scrutiny of Chief Anderson's unwavering gaze. There was no room for excuses, no space for the misguided assumptions that had led to the tragic misjudgment. The chief's silence was a condemnation more potent than any rebuke, a quiet testament to the immutable truth that authority must be exercised with compassion and fairness, not with prejudice and rashness. In that moment of reckoning, the true extent of the betrayal was laid bare for all to see, not just the betrayal of a young boy's trust, but the betrayal of the fundamental principles that bound the community together. Chief Anderson's voice, measured and resolute, resonated with a clarity that seemed to echo off the bare walls of the interrogation room. "This is not about your duty," he intoned, "but about your humanity. You have failed not only the man you swore to protect, but also the values we hold dear." Each word was a clarion call for accountability, a summons to confront the dark undercurrents of bias that had, even if momentarily, eclipsed the noble ideals of service. As the gravity of his misstep sank in, Officer Brandon's demeanor crumbled further. His earlier confidence dissolved into a palpable fear, a fear that was as much for his own future as it was for the irreversible harm he had inflicted upon Elijah. The transformation in his countenance was unmistakable, the defiant posture of an officer now replaced by the humbled stance of a man forced to face the consequences of his actions. His eyes, once so sure of their purpose, now shimmered with unshed tears, a silent testament to the internal collapse that had been precipitated by the chief's unyielding scrutiny. In the ensuing moments, the dynamics within the room shifted once more as Chief Anderson moved to address the broader implications of the incident. With a voice that was both a lament for what had transpired and a fervent declaration of the need for change, he declared that Brandon's actions were inexcusable, a betrayal not only of protocol, but of the moral imperative to protect and serve with integrity. His words resonated with the quiet power of a man who had seen too much injustice to tolerate even a single instance of it. "We must learn from this," he said, "and ensure that such a breach of trust is never repeated. Our duty is to serve with honor, to uphold the dignity of every person in our community, and to recognize that our actions, however small, have far-reaching consequences." It was then that Chief Anderson laid out a vision for reform that extended far beyond the walls of that interrogation room. His declaration was not solely a moment of reprimand, but a call to transform the very institution that had been tarnished by the day's events. He spoke of the need for comprehensive reforms within the department, for new training programs aimed at eradicating implicit bias, and for a renewed commitment to the principles of empathy, accountability, and justice. His words painted a picture of a future where every officer would be guided not just by the letter of the law, but by the spirit of compassion that lay at the heart of true service. In that moment, the room became a crucible for change, a place where the seeds of redemption were sown amidst the ruins of past mistakes. For Elijah, the revelation of his true identity and the subsequent intervention by his father brought with it a bittersweet relief. The protective shield of Chief Anderson's presence offered him a momentary reprieve from the terror and pain that had defined the hours before. Yet the scars of the ordeal remained, etched into his very being as a reminder of the fragility of innocence. As he looked up into his father's eyes, he saw not only a stern rebuke of the injustice that had been inflicted upon him, but also a deep well of love and a promise of unwavering support. In that gaze, Elijah found the strength to believe that his suffering would not be in vain, that his ordeal could serve as a catalyst for a broader transformation within a system desperately in need of redemption. The revelation of the truth, that Elijah was not merely an unfortunate casualty of mistaken identity, but the son of the very man who now stood as a pillar of justice, sent shockwaves through the room. It forced every person present to confront the human cost of prejudice and the profound impact of a single, misguided action. Chief Anderson's unyielding resolve to right the wrongs of the day was met with a collective, unspoken understanding that the path to redemption was arduous but necessary, a path that would require introspection, accountability, and the courage to embrace change. As the minutes turned to hours, the reverberations of that fateful moment began to extend beyond the confines of the interrogation room. The events that had unfolded would soon ripple outward, stirring a wider conversation within the community about the delicate balance between authority and compassion. News of the incident and of Chief Anderson's resolute intervention spread through the corridors of power and into the hearts of the people of Chicago. The revelation became a symbol, a powerful reminder that justice must be tempered with mercy, and that no one, regardless of rank or station, was above the scrutiny of accountability. In that transformative hour, the seeds of redemption took root. Officer Brandon, now isolated in his own remorse, faced the prospect of a long and arduous journey toward atonement. His career, once marked by the promise of service and honor, now hung in the balance as he grappled with the consequences of his actions. The path to redemption, though uncertain and fraught with challenges, would require him to confront the biases that had clouded his judgment and to embark on a rigorous process of self-reflection and reform. The weight of his transgression was a burden that he would carry as a constant reminder of the delicate interplay between power and responsibility, a lesson that, though harsh, was essential for any true transformation. Chief Anderson, in his role as both a leader and a father, set forth an unwavering commitment to ensure that the injustice of the day would serve as a catalyst for meaningful change. His declaration of intent to overhaul practices within the department resonated with a quiet strength, an assurance that the values of empathy and accountability would be restored. In his heart, he believed that true redemption was not found in punishment alone, but in the ability to learn, adapt, and emerge stronger from the crucible of error. The room, once filled with the acrid tension of confrontation and regret, began to transform into a space where the possibility of healing emerged, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit when faced with its darkest hours. In the interplay of stern authority and tender compassion, the seeds of redemption promised to grow into a future where every individual's dignity would be honored and every wrong would be met with a commitment to repair. For Elijah, that future was both a distant hope and an immediate necessity, a future where the scars of injustice might one day be transformed into the stepping stones of a new beginning. In the wake of the revelation and the subsequent outpouring of accountability, the interrogation room bore witness not only to the breakdown of a system, but to the possibility of its rebirth. As Chief Anderson's steady presence and heartfelt declarations reverberated through the space, a solemn promise was made, one that transcended the immediate pain of the day and sought to rebuild trust and restore hope. It was a promise that the path forward, though steeped in the lessons of the past, would be paved with the unwavering belief that every mistake held within it the seed of transformation. And so, in that room, amidst the lingering echoes of remorse and the quiet resolve of a father determined to protect his son and his community, the journey of revelation and redemption was set firmly in motion. The truth, once hidden beneath layers of misguided judgment, had been brought into the harsh light of accountability. With each measured word and every solemn gaze exchanged, the foundation was laid for a future in which justice and compassion would no longer be at odds, but would work in tandem to forge a more humane and equitable path forward. In that transformative hour, as the raw wounds of the day began to show signs of healing beneath the tender ministrations of accountability and hope, it became clear that the road to redemption was not merely a personal journey for one man or one family. It was a collective call to action, a clarion call to re-examine the very principles upon which a community had been built. The revelation of Elijah's identity, coupled with Chief Anderson's decisive intervention, served as a catalyst for change that promised to resonate far beyond the sterile walls of that room. It was a moment that would, in time, come to symbolize the enduring power of truth and the possibility of redemption, even in the face of the deepest injustices. Thus, as the interrogation room slowly emptied and the echoes of that fateful confrontation receded into a reflective silence, a new chapter began to unfold. A chapter defined not by the scars of the past, but by the resolute determination to transform pain into a force for lasting, meaningful change. In that transformative space, the seeds of revelation and redemption had been sown, promising a future where the lessons of the day would guide the healing of a community and the rebirth of a system once tarnished by prejudice. As the days passed, the weight of the events that had unfolded within the walls of the police station began to settle into the collective consciousness of Chicago. The city, so often bustling with the noise of its own ambition, had become uncomfortably quiet, as if holding its breath. The trauma inflicted on Elijah had sent ripples through the community, stirring conversations and igniting debates about justice, race, and the role of authority. The truth of what had happened could not be erased, but there was a growing recognition that the healing process would not begin with silence or avoidance. It would begin with facing the truth, acknowledging the hurt, and taking the necessary steps to repair what had been broken. Elijah, though still recovering from the physical and emotional scars of that day, found himself beginning to understand the true depth of the support around him. In the days after the incident, Chief Anderson worked tirelessly to ensure that his son's experience was not an isolated one, but part of a larger movement toward justice and reconciliation. It was clear that the incident had revealed deep fractures in the system, fractures that could not be mended by punitive measures alone. The community needed to heal, and healing would require transparency, accountability, and a commitment to long-term change. The outpouring of support Elijah received from his community became a balm for his wounded spirit. The quiet gestures, friends bringing food, neighbors offering kind words, the open arms of teachers and mentors slowly rebuilt the sense of security that had been torn away. Elijah began to realize that while his body had been violated, his soul was still intact, and it was up to him whether to allow the wound to define his future or to use it as a stepping stone to something greater. His strength, once buried beneath the layers of fear and confusion, began to emerge slowly, like a sprout breaking through the soil after a long, harsh winter. Yet, even as he found solace in the support of his family and the compassion of his neighbors, Elijah knew that the journey to recovery was not his alone to take. It was the city's journey as well. As the story of what happened to him spread, people began to stand up, not only for his personal healing, but for the healing of a community that had been torn apart by misunderstanding, prejudice, and fear. Activists, local leaders, and even members of the police force who recognized the depth of the injustice began to work together to push for meaningful reforms. Chief Anderson became a tireless advocate for systemic change. His position, once one of quiet authority, now carried the weight of personal responsibility. He vowed that his son's pain would not be in vain. The chief pushed for new measures to address the deep-rooted issues within the police department. He demanded rigorous training to combat implicit bias, new policies that prioritize de-escalation over force, and, perhaps most importantly, a commitment to listening, really listening, to the concerns of the community. These reforms were not just about policy, they were about rebuilding trust, about ensuring that no child would ever again walk down the street carrying the burden of suspicion simply because of their skin color. Brandon, too, was forced to confront the consequences of his actions. His path to redemption was not an easy one. He knew that his mistakes could not be undone, that no apology could reverse the trauma he had caused. But in the aftermath of the incident, he found himself in a position to learn, to truly learn, about the communities he had sworn to protect. Through counseling, community outreach, and countless hours of reflection, Brandon began to see the layers of his own biases, his assumptions, and the way in which his training had failed to prepare him to serve with empathy and understanding. The journey was difficult, filled with moments of discomfort and self-doubt, but it was a journey he knew he had to undertake. Redemption, he understood, would not come from forgetting, but from facing the truth head-on, from proving through action that he could be better. For Elijah, witnessing this process of transformation in the people around him began to shift his perception of the world. He understood perhaps more deeply than ever before that healing wasn't just about individuals. It was about communities. It was about everyone coming together to acknowledge their faults, to face the uncomfortable truths, and to actively work toward change. He saw his father's tireless commitment to justice, the way he refused to let the system continue as it had. Elijah saw Brandon's genuine attempts to understand the pain he had caused, and the quiet humility with which he sought redemption. These were not perfect solutions, but they were real steps towards something better, and that, to Elijah, was the very definition of hope. The broader community, too, began to change. Conversations about race, justice, and the role of law enforcement no longer felt like uncomfortable whispers in the back rooms of community centers. They were held in the open, discussed on street corners, in churches, and at local schools. People from every walk of life were acknowledging their own biases and the ways in which they had perpetuated a system that allowed incidents like Elijah's to occur. Local leaders, activists, and educators formed coalitions with the police department to create community-based programs aimed at fostering understanding and bridging divides. Public forums were held where citizens could share their stories, voice their concerns, and demand accountability from those in power. Elijah, now growing stronger with each passing day, began to understand the true power of his voice. He found that even at his young age, he could contribute to the dialogue, that his experiences had value, and that by sharing them, he could help others see the world through his eyes. It was in this newfound understanding that Elijah began to heal, not just from the physical wounds of the pepper spray, but from the emotional wounds of feeling unseen, unheard, and unjustly judged. His voice, once small and fragile, grew steadier, more confident, as he realized that his suffering had a greater purpose. It was a purpose rooted not in revenge or resentment, but in the desire to see a world where all children, regardless of the color of their skin, could walk the streets without fear of unjust treatment. The road to redemption was long and arduous, but it was also a path paved with the determination to create something better. And as the days passed, the city of Chicago began to transform, brick by brick, conversation by conversation, act of kindness by act of kindness. Elijah's story, once one of pain and suffering, had become a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope for a community determined to rise above the failures of the past. The realization that healing was a collective effort, that it required the active participation of everyone, from the police to the community, from the young to the old, became the foundation upon which a new Chicago would be built. In the months that followed, the healing process continued. Elijah, though still carrying the scars of that fateful day, began to emerge as a symbol of resilience. His story was no longer just his own. It had become a story for every child, every family, every community that had ever been wronged by an unjust system. And with every step he took toward healing, the world around him took a step closer toward redemption. And so, as the season shifted and the city of Chicago began to feel the weight of a new dawn breaking, Elijah and his community stood together in the fragile but powerful light of hope. The future, though uncertain and fraught with challenges, seemed just a little bit brighter now, a little bit more promising. The journey was far from over, but the path forward was one of shared understanding, collective responsibility, and unwavering commitment to ensuring that no one would ever again have to walk alone in the face of injustice. Elijah's resilience, the city's transformation, and the unyielding commitment of those who had chosen redemption over regret had given rise to a new beginning, a new dawn filled with the promise of healing, of hope, and of a world forever changed by the courage to face the truth and rebuild what had been broken. Elijah's story is one of profound transformation, both personal and collective. From the moment he was unjustly attacked by Officer Brandon, his life was turned upside down. What should have been a routine walk to the park turned into a nightmare that left him physically and emotionally scarred. Yet, despite the cruelty he faced, Elijah's resilience shone through. He didn't allow the trauma of that day to define him. Instead, with the love and support of his family and community, he began to rebuild not only his trust in others, but also his belief in the power of redemption. The pivotal moment in the story came when Elijah's father, Chief Anderson, stepped in. His intervention was not only a personal act of protection, but also a symbolic moment of justice and accountability. The revelation that Elijah was his son triggered a wave of introspection and action, not only within the police department but across the entire community. Through a series of reforms and a genuine commitment to change, the city of Chicago began its journey toward healing. Elijah's ordeal sparked a broader conversation about race, justice, and the need for reform within systems of authority. It became a call to action for those in positions of power to confront their biases and work toward creating a more just society. Officer Brandon, though initially paralyzed by his own mistakes, embarked on a difficult but necessary journey toward redemption. His process was not one of simple atonement, but of deep reflection and transformation. He realized that the harm he caused went beyond his initial mistake. It was part of a broader systemic issue. His willingness to learn, grow, and become an advocate for change made him an essential part of the healing process. In the end, Brandon's evolution mirrored the city's shift from a place of fear and prejudice to one of empathy and accountability. The culmination of Elijah's story was not just about his personal healing, but about the profound impact one individual's experience could have on an entire community. His journey illustrates the incredible strength of the human spirit, the power of collective action, and the unyielding hope that, no matter how dark the moment, there is always room for redemption and growth. Through love, resilience, and the willingness to confront hard truths, Elijah, his father, Officer Brandon, and the city of Chicago were able to chart a new course forward. The lesson from Elijah's story is clear. No one is beyond redemption. We all have the power to change, to learn from our mistakes, and to make the world a better place. It is essential to recognize the humanity in others, especially in times of adversity, and to be willing to take responsibility for our actions. In the context of our everyday lives, this means questioning our own biases, seeking understanding instead of judgment, and working towards empathy in every interaction. We must also advocate for change within systems that perpetuate injustice, and we should never underestimate the power of one voice to spark a wave of transformation. Elijah's story is a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is hope for a brighter future. It challenges us all to rise above the forces that divide us and to rebuild what has been broken with compassion, understanding, and a shared commitment to justice. If you found this story inspiring and thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps us motivated to create more content that challenges, inspires, and uplifts. Together, we can continue to share stories that make a difference. Thank you for being a part of this journey.